What's up, y'all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about what to do before going after government contracts. Now, if you're new here, my name is Jermaine and I have a background in audit, both external and internal, so both public and private, as well as nonprofit accounting. I run Visionary Accounting Group, which is a boutique accounting firm that specifically serves nonprofit organizations. And the reason that that's important is because my first introduction to working in the nonprofit space was working with government contracts. And so if you do know anything about them, this process can be very complex. And so as a first timer, it was a lot. And so if you have plans on going after government contracts, or if you're currently managing them, then you want to stay tuned for this video. Before diving into working with the government, right, contracting with the government, it's important to understand the landscape, because as a nonprofit organization, you are already heavily regulated. When you choose to partner and work with the government and go after these government contracts, it adds an additional layer of requirements, okay? It can be complex. Now, partnering with the government also is a great way to get funding, right? And for many organizations who get these multi-year contracts, it's great for sustainability, but they'll also tell you that it comes with a lot of work to maintain and to be compliant. So with understanding the landscape, you do want to kind of make sure you do your research, right? And you have the appropriate stakeholders at the table to make an informed decision. And you also want to make sure that as part of understanding that landscape, that when you do that research, you look for grants or contracts that are in alignment with the work that your organization does, so that there is no dysfunction or misalignment with the money or the funds that you're going after and the work that your organization is doing. So at the very base level, that's the first step, right? Understanding the landscape. So that leads me into my next point, which is aligning, right, this process with your mission, right? And so typically when the government chooses to grant you a contract or they're choosing to partner with you, they like to partner with organizations that have like a proven track record in the area in which they are looking for funding, right? And so this is why it's important to make sure that you have those like program impact reports, that you're able to show like the work that you've done and how it's impacted your community or how it's impacted the specific cause that you've gone after, because it speaks to your mission and how this contract or these funds that you're going after with the government can actually push that initiative forward or help you move your organization forward by supporting or getting behind that mission. Now, this next point is very, very key. So come in a little closer. You want to make sure that you have built the capacity to manage the funding that you're going after. This was probably the toughest part of my job as a first-time nonprofit controller, because the multiple contracts came with significant demands and we did not have the manpower to manage said demands. So as you're preparing, you want to think about capacity, and that could look like hiring new people, building out infrastructure, revamping your processes, right? That could look like implementing new technology. A big part of what we were doing was like moving from a desktop software to cloud accounting that would help make some of our reporting a little bit easier. It was determining what the process would be to share information between program staff who were managing, right, the ins and outs, the day-to-days of these contracts, to us who also had to manage the financial aspect, but then had to report on that, right? What did that process need to look like? And so it is important to make sure that you have the proper people in place. And you know, when I say people, actually, let's take that back. You want to make sure you have the proper resources in place. And that means people, that means technology, and that means process, because those three things together help make the process go smooth. It's when you have breaks and gaps in those processes that it becomes very difficult to make sure that you are compliant. And part of being compliant is you making sure that your organization has the capacity and the infrastructure to manage said funding that you're going after with the government. The next thing you need to do before going after these government contracts is making sure you have a strong internal control environment. These government contracts come with strong regulations and requirements, and they expect you to adhere to them, and they will come in and they will make sure that you are. So you have where, if your organization is making a certain amount of money, where you have the state requirement to get audited. But then you also, depending on how much money that you've gotten from the federal government, there is also an additional audit that you may have to get if you hit that threshold. That's 2. 3, there are programmatic audits. Or agency audits, I should say. So if you contract with an individual agency in the government, they can come in and determine, okay, for Q2, I want to see boom, 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 boom. I'm actually currently going through a programmatic audit with a client now, with a government agency that they work with, and they are asking for a lot of information, a lot of backup. And so you have to make sure that you have strong controls in place to make sure that you are able to provide these things, because if not, funding gets held up, either delayed or it gets stopped altogether. And in some cases, if you have like contracts that are reimbursable, sometimes they will require some of their money back if they come in and realize that you aren't able to show proof of what you've done or how you've spent, right? And how it is in alignment with this contract that you've received from them. And I have been on both sides, those that have done and gone through this well, and those who have not. And so it is very key that you build that strong internal control environment. This next point is a little less tactical, but it's about building strong relationships. So as you get into this government contracting process, you'll see that, there's a lot of paperwork, different applications, different people that you're kind of being passed on to. But I find that once you've secured that contract, especially for those that are multi-year, a lot of times you end up working with the same people. It is important to build a relationship with those contacts because you will need them. I can remember the amount of times that I've reached out directly because maybe our invoicing was going to be late, but we needed to speed up, when we did deliver the invoice getting paid, because maybe payroll was right around the corner. Or when we had issues with our system, being able to tap someone and say, hey, I know this is due here, but here is what's going on. But then also just to show your appreciation, right? I talk about when you are getting monthly reports, one of the things that you want to be looking at is donor engagement, right? And how you're engaging your donors. And even though receiving a government contract isn't coming from an individual owner, it's coming from an agency, and that agency has staff members that work hard, and you are normally appointed someone or somebodies that you work with. And so it's important that you keep that relationship going, right? And that it is good and that it's open and transparent and authentic, because a lot of times there are so many hoops that you're jumping through with these government contracts. And if they have certain relationships or pull in the agency and the agencies themselves, a lot of times they can help you push through those barriers. But if you don't speak to them, if you're not compliant, if you're not delivering your reports on time, you're not responsive, when you need something, it's going to be very difficult to get them to help you or to want to help you, right? And so you don't want to be in that space. So it's important to make sure that you are developing and maintaining good relationships. Okay, I got 2 more points. This next one really is in my arena, right? As someone who runs accounting departments for nonprofits, but it's financial readiness. And it's not just hey, we need this money, look at our financials, and you can tell that, we want to run this program or go after this initiative and we don't have enough money. It's deeper than that, right? They know you need the money, right, to move this initiative or, to run this program. But are you set up in a way to properly steward this financial obligation? Because it is an obligation. Do you have proper bookkeeping practices in place, right? Do you have good record keeping? And the record keeping piece is key, because when they come in to audit you and they're looking at specifics, they want to have they want to be able to see supporting documentation for these things. And then if you don't have good record keeping, it's going to be very difficult for you to prove or to show how you spent these funds, for you to prove, right, that it was admissible, right? It's in alignment with the contract, because some of these come with, spending guidelines, with budgets, and where you have to be strict about what gets spent and what line items. So you want your bookkeeping and your record keeping have to be pristine. Do you have the infrastructure as far as people, technology, right? Because these things also help you to be compliant efficiently, right? And to show your readiness in order to be able to manage the financial obligations of this piece, right? Of this contract. And the last piece of this financial readiness part, right, is like having up-to-date financials, right? Making sure those financials are accurate, making sure you're able to provide them when asked, and also making sure you're able to report specifically on that funding when asked, right? So there's one financial report that you can look at that's for the organization, but then you need to also be able to drill down to show financials specifically for these contracts, right? That support these different initiatives or programs. And that's the piece that I find that organizations miss, and that's the piece that ends up being manual, because then you start trying to parse out from the data that you get for the organization, and a lot of times it's not accurate, right? It might be almost there, but we don't want almost there. We want 100%. And the last thing I'll say about financial readiness is that being able to demonstrate that your organization is ready financially also means demonstrating that your organization has the financial stability to take this on, which also boosts your credibility in the eyes of this organization or this entity, this agency, right? Because they know that their government contracts are coming with these heavy requirements and these complexities. And so when they see that you've already got these things in place and you're coming to them saying, hey, we've already been doing this, now we want to expand and take on these contracts, take on partnering with you, it's like, okay, well, we don't have to worry about you getting these things in place because you've already done this. And that's why the video is titled, What You Need to Be Doing Before You Go After These Contracts. Because if you do this first, then it also makes getting these contracts a little bit easier, because a lot of times these are the things that they're looking for. And if you don't have them, then you get denied, and we don't want that for you. Now, this last point are for those of you who are going after them, and those of you who may already have partnered or gotten a government contract, right? It's the monitoring and the reporting aspect of this whole process. Once you secure the contract, that's when the real work begins. Government agencies require thorough monitoring to ensure that funds are allocated and spent appropriately. And so you have to make sure that your tracking system is pristine. And this is where programs has to work with fiscal to make sure that this is in lock and step, right? That there are no gaps, because it makes it harder to, one, go after additional contracts, but also get these contracts renewed. And again, if this is a reimbursable contract, it makes it difficult to get paid out. In my first job working as a nonprofit controller, when I got there, the organization had over $1 million held up due to invoices not being submitted, and those invoices hadn't been submitted because they didn't have the proper record keeping and bookkeeping in place to support what they were invoicing for. So the invoices kept getting pushed back because there kept being questions about, what's this item? Where's the invoice that supports this item? Where's the receipt that supports this item? Is this in line with the budget that we put forth when we first decided to contract with you guys? It can be a lot, right? And I don't want to scare you guys, because choosing to become a government contractor, right? Someone who partners with the government, can be good for your organization, because again, once you're in there and you do well, these agencies typically really like to continue to fund you. But you have to show that you are worthy of that, right? And so it's important to make sure that you are looking at these things that I've discussed here, and you are putting these things in place before you go after the contracts. Now, if there's anything here that I said that is confusing, or it's like, can you go deeper into that? Please let me know. This is also why, though, at Visionary, we specifically like to work with organizations that are contracting with the government, because we know all of the stipulations, all of the requirements, we understand the complexities, and we like to take that off your plate so that you can focus on driving the mission forward so that you can focus on making sure those program milestones are met, or making sure you're pushing forward those program initiatives. It gets very difficult to try to do both when you don't have a fully functioning accounting department within your organization. And if that's something that you lack, I would say actually that's the last point. Then you need to find a partner that can supplement that for you. And that's what we do at Visionary Accounting Group. Now we have a wait list up right now, but we're going to be opening doors very, very soon. So if you are interested in getting some accounting support and actually building out that accounting department without it having to be in-house, then I definitely invite you to join our wait list so that you can be notified first when our doors open. Again, I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next one.